I'm Alex. I'm from the UK. I'm from across the pond. And I hear you guys like a good old-fashioned English accent. So I guess that bodes well for me. I'm here to talk today about Bowline, which is a application framework, Ruby application framework I've made recently. And it's actually pronounced Bowline, not Bowline or Bowline, but to be honest, I've given up now. You can call it whatever you want. And I've actually this is the first time I've really talked about Bowline, but there's a website that I actually released yesterday. You can check that out. And I'm hoping it'll be the Rails of the desktop world. We'll see. Big ambitions. So before I go into the talk, I want to talk a little bit about desktop applications in general. They're not seen a really good light by Ruby developers. They're sort of viewed as a dying breed. You know, the thin clients is the new thing, etc. I advocate a combination between the two. I mean, how many of you guys use Twitter clients, Instant Messenger clients, you know, all these desktop clients, you know, music clients, Spotify? Well, it's not over here yet, but you get my gist. And I'm hoping that if we have a really good Ruby implementation for the desktop, then maybe that will change some minds. So this talk is split into 3 parts: Bowline, CSS3 and HTML5, and Synchro. But they all have a Bowline theme to them. Oh, that's nice. So here's some example apps that I built using Bowline. This is Teamforce, which uses XMPP. It's a bit like Campfire. I'm going to be releasing that free soon. So Bowline is comprised of 3 parts: WX Widgets, which is C++ cross-platform framework for building desktop apps. WebKit uses the trunk version as well, so you get all the new CSS3 features. And Ruby 1.9. So MVC is one of the core parts to Bowline. And that's one of the big differences between Bowline and similar desktop frameworks. It's cross-platform-ish. Okay, it doesn't work on Windows yet. It will do though, because I'm building a startup behind this, and Windows is definitely on the agenda. Like I say, it uses WebKit, and your views are written in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And again, that's a big difference between something like Bowline and Shoes. And then there's this binding between HTML and Ruby. I'm going to be getting into that later, but that's one of the big parts of Bowline. So this is the startup that I'm building behind Bowline, or for Bowline. It's a collaborative task manager. You can create tasks for each other or for yourself. If you think maybe things.app cross to Google Wave or Dropbox cross to Basecamp. And if you want to be on the private beta, then let me know. But this is really pushing forward development of Bowline. And in case you didn't think that commercial software could actually help open source, which I'm sure none of you do, you know, these are the projects that have actually come out of Taskforce so far. Bowline, of course, Supermodel, which I'll be getting into later, Nestful, which is like a REST client alternative, Remail, you can send and receive emails in Rails RESTfully, Synchro, I'm going to be talking about that later, Ruby OAuth, which is just a very simple OAuth library, RByte, you can compile your Ruby code to bytecode, so you don't have to distribute your source code with your Bowline apps. And all these grey projects are the ones I've contributed to, all through the work through Taskforce. So MVC, like I was saying earlier, is a big part of Bowline, but in Bowline it's slightly different. It's MBV, Model Binder View. A binder is just it's 2 things. It's a view abstraction on the model, and it's also makes sure that when the model changes, the view also changes. So there's a callback in the binder, and when the model is updated, then the callback is executed, and the view is updated. So let's say there's a new user. The binder would be the callback in the binder would be executed, and then the new user would appear in the view. So models. I've developed something called Supermodel to use with Bowline. In-memory databases, you don't actually have to use this with Bowline. You can use this in your Rails apps if you want. So it's built on top of active models, so you get validations, callbacks, observers, all for free. And persistence as well. You can just, well, I'll get onto that, but you can, this is a simple example of using supermodel, and it's very similar to active record interface. And if you want to persist that to disk, then you just include supermodel marshal model, and that will marshal, Bowline marshals all the data to disk when it shuts down, and then when your Bowline app starts up again, then that all gets executed and run. So binders, like I said, these are binding between HTML and Ruby. And here's an example of it. You've got this bind tweet method, and tweet is just the model that you're binding to. And then you've got this initial method which populates the HTML with the initial records. And you actually have singleton binders as well as collection binders. Windows, I won't be going into these in great detail, but there's each window is obviously like an application window. You get, like, say, progress or preferences. There's a main window instance, and when that closes, the application exits. And every app has a main window instance. So views are written in HTML and CSS3. Here's an example. You can see we've got this tweets div, which is bound to the tweets binder. And you can see it's got, don't worry about the class of item, but the class of body is important because that automatically gets populated by the model. So helpers, there's no RHTML in this. So they're similar to Rails, but you just call them from JavaScript. This, for example, launches a URL in the operating system's default browser. So here's a Hello World demo, but I thought Hello World's a bit boring, and a Twitter client is the new Hello World, really. So here we're going to code up a Twitter client. So Bowline Gen is a Bowline Gen app, which generates an app. And then you need to actually bundle the gems. Don't do gem 19, I've got alias, just gem bundle. So all the gems are bundled now, and then script run, which is alias to SR, sorry about this. So there you go, hello world. So that's all very quick. Now let's actually tap it into Twitter. First of all, we're going to bind it to a tweets binder. So we're going to generate this binder. Then we're going to use JavaScript to bind a tweets div, which we've yet to write, to the tweets binder. So here's the div. And then we're going to have a div of item inside it, and then a span with the body. And that body gets populated with the model's attributes. And in the binder, in the initial method, we're not actually going to bind it to a model yet. We're just going to write an initial method and return an array of hashes. And that will automatically get shown in the view. So we run that, we can see hello tweets there, and that's straight from the binder. So let's bind it to a model now. If we Bowline Gen model tweet, and the model is, by default is a supermodel model. Just the attributes of body. So in the binder, we bind it to tweet. We return all the tweets for the initial method. Class is just pointing to tweet. And then we've got initializer method, which gets run on app startup. You've got initializers, and there's this first run as well, and that will get obviously run on the first time the app gets started up, but on subsequent startups it won't get run. So we're going to create 2 tweets, and if we run the app, we should see 2 tweets in the interface. There we go. Now let's tie it into Twitter. So let's get the Twitter gem in there, and then bundle that, because Bowline uses its own version, own Ruby instance, so it needs to know where the gems are. So we're just going to use the Twitter the Twitter gem. If you have a look on Ruby Forge, it's there. App.config is a class that loads all its attributes from application.yaml, and it's just a way so I don't have to show you my Twitter username and password. But it's quite useful. You can write to it as well. So we're going to iterate through all the client's friends, and we're going to create tweets for all of them. I hope you can all see this. I'm sorry if the text is too small. Right, so let's get rid of all the dummy data and run the app. And the startup time will be a little slower this time because we should be running it in a thread, but for the purpose of this example, we're not. But so that Twitter call will be called before the app actually opens. So there you are. So you can see all the tweets there in the interface. So I thought, with a bit of styling, you can make it look fairly good. And you can actually check this out on Twitter. On GitHub under my GitHub account. It's an example app released open source. And I thought, well, let's do a more interesting example. Why not make a file transfer app using Bowline, Bonjour, TCP, and HTTP? So I'm not actually going to code this in front of you, but I'm going to take you through the main bits of the app. You've got the server.serve method, the server.list method, and the server.register method. And in the server, we've got this register method, which registers the Bonjour service on the local area network. You've got the serve method, which just starts up a web-break server. And then we've got this list method, which goes through all the nodes on the local area network and creates server instances for each of them and saves them. And then we've got this method at the bottom, which when the server is saved, we go and actually do an HTTP call to that server, and we find out what assets it's serving, basically. So that's the models. We got asset model, which is like a local asset, and we got remote asset, which is a remote asset. So now we got binders. We bound those models up to the binders. You can see we've got this add pass method, which we can call from JavaScript with a list of paths. And you can see this callback method, and you can pass anything to that callback method, and then JavaScript can you can pass a function when you call a method from JavaScript to Ruby, and if you pass anything to that callback method, then JavaScript will receive that. And then you've got this async method, which actually runs add pass in a thread because it's a little slow to do. And you don't want the GUI interface locking up. And then here you've got the same sort of thing. You've got this instance method download, and it pops up a file select box, and then when the user selects a path, it downloads the remote file to that location. And then we've got the index file. We've got these two divs that are bound to the two binders. And we've got, I'm using this framework that I built, JavaScript framework, but I'll get into that later. But it's a state machine, basically. And we're just populating the interface with all those assets. And then we've got this drop area, so you can drag an asset onto the app. And then when you drag an asset onto the app, then we call asset.addPass. And we pass that function, which gets executed by the callback. So that's pretty much it. If we can also provide an icon. yeah, that can be just any ordinary PNG. And if we do run script build, then it will build the .app file, which you can then distribute, and it's just a Mac.app application file. So there it is. It's got a Mr. T icon. And there's the app. And if you drag a file onto it, then that file will then appear in the list. And if there are any clients on the remote network, then you also see the remote files there. Okay, let me just go next. And so you can see, yeah, the remote files there is just somebody else serving a file. And if you click on that, then a file dialog browser will pop up, and you can select a file. So the development cycle, unfortunately, if something changes in Ruby, you need to restart the app. But something changes in HTML or JavaScript, then you can just refresh the app. You can use the web view inspector and also the Ruby debugger, as long as you make sure it's the Ruby 1.9 debugger. Bowline desktop, that's all where the nasty C++ action of Bowline is. But you don't need to worry about that, because it exposes a nice interface. You've got this app, clipboard, you can read and write to clipboard, put up dialog boxes, you can get the local IP information from the hosts. Here's some of the examples of this API. Exit the app, put up a dialog message. You can set the little star on the dock, like the new mail star. Open the default browser with a URL. You can pass the network a block online, which will be executed when the app gets online. Desktop path gives you cross-platform access to path information, like the user's desktop, the user's documents path. Main window, like I say, every app has a main window, and you can call, this for example will pop up a file select box. And no API would be complete without a way to ring the system bell, quite important. So Bowline update, one of the arguments against desktop apps is they're difficult to update, which is true. And Bowline update is one way I hope to solve that issue. It basically updates your apps in the background automatically. So when the app starts up, a URL will be pinged, and if the endpoint version is different from the local version of the app, then it'll download the new app, extract it, and then install it, and the next time the user starts up your desktop app, they'll have the update. And that's similar to how Spotify actually does its updates. And it's quite cool, because whenever you open it, you see new features and things, which you haven't had to download separately. I'm quite an advocate for automatic updating. Chrome is another example of doing that. Bowline.js. So this is what I was using earlier, you saw in the example. It's basically as a class framework for JavaScript, inheritance framework. There's a state machine, and there's a view manager, there's a menu manager. You don't have to use this, but if you build anything more complicated than a hello world, then your JavaScript can get pretty messy. And you don't have to use this with Bowline either. So what's next for Bowline? Well, more documentation. There's a website and a wiki, but it's lacking at the moment. Windows support. I want to build Bowline build server. If you've used Titanium, they have this cool thing where you can just press one button, your app gets uploaded to the cloud, and then it gets a Windows, Mac, and Linux version gets created of your app, and then it gives you some URLs that you can give to people to download those apps. And I'd like to do that for Bowline as well. A Bowline update app engine, that would be quite cool. Gem extensions is something that I want to do for Task Force. It would be quite cool if you were inside the app and you could browse to a page, a sort of store, a bit like the Firefox Extension Manager, and you can install extensions straight from inside the app, and those would just be Ruby gems. And if I build that, I'll open source it. So the second part of my talk, CSS3 and HTML5. Again, this has got a Bowline theme to it. You can use all these new things with Bowline. In fact, unless your clientele is completely using WebKit trunk, then Bowline is the only place you'll be able to use these things. Okay, VBox and HBoxes. I haven't seen many people talk about these. They're very useful. If any of you used Adobe Flex, they have this VBox and HBox thing. I haven't displayed all the CSS here, but if you click on that gist, you can see all of it. But here's an example of it in use. This is Task Force. You've got 2 columns. You've got a VBox there, all the contents displayed vertically. You've got another VBox, and then you've got an HBox. The 2 VBoxes are inside. Box shadow, which you've probably heard of, but inset you might not have heard of. You can put an inset box shadow, like in this example, you can see there's a box shadow on the inside of that text area, and there's a box shadow on the panel. Text shadow, if you look over on the OS X operating system, you'll see text shadow being used everywhere. So it's a designer thing. If you use a white text shadow, then the text looks inset. If you use it dark, then it just looks like a normal shadow. And the API to this is the same across WebKit and Firefox. Border radius, again, just random borders. API is the same, Firefox and WebKit, unless you want to do different corners, in which case the API is different. Ellipsis, you see those 3 dots at the end of the name. Basically, that name is overflowed, and ellipsis just puts the 3 dots on the end. And it's much nicer than just cutting it off or doing it with JavaScript. It's one of those really nice additions to CSS3 that should have been there from the start. Gradients is another thing that should have been there for the start. The API to this is very different across WebKit and Mozilla. You just give it you can give it 2 colors or multiple colors. You can have color stops. You can see a gradient in the background of this account manager and also on the title bar. CSS transitions. These are pretty cool, just for adding the odd effect to make your app feel a little more tangible. It's difficult to see in this example, but when you hover over the Create button, we add this blue shadow. And because there's a transition on that blue shadow, then it sort of slowly fades out, right, rather than just appearing. And I believe that Firefox has now got CSS transition support in trunk. Keyframes. Now, these are more like programmers' versions of CSS transitions. All the animations you can see at the moment are done with CSS keyframes. 3D transforms. You're going to have to be using Mac for these. And if you build anything cool with this, let me know, because I haven't seen anything sort of commercially used using sort of CSS transforms. But if you do that, then yeah, I'll be very interested. I'm sure there's a lot of good applications. This is like an HTML5 video player that I built. If you go to flarevideo.com, I haven't sort of publicly released it yet, but there it is. All the controls here are done in HTML5 and and CSS3. And the range input, the seek input on that video player was actually one of the new range inputs that HTML5 gives you. You've got this search input that creates this little magnifying glass and this cross, and also gives you some nice JavaScript events that you can latch onto. And this placeholder, people used to do this with JavaScript the whole time, but it just puts a little bit of text there that you can click on, and the text would then disappear. You've got drag and drop, and the API for this is horrendous, but I've abstracted it in Bowline.-js. One of the JavaScript files abstracts the drag-drop API. Aristo, if any of you guys have heard of Cappuccino, that's what it uses, the theme it uses by the 280 North guys, I think. Anyway, so I didn't really want to code in Objective-C, and so I ported it to CSS3. And that's under my GitHub, and you can use that with your Bowline applications. So the last bit of my talk is Synchro. And I built this for my Bowline apps because I wanted a way to synchronize the local desktop with the remote servers and also let them work offline. And if any of you have seen the maglev demos of these 2 different interpreters or instances of Ruby talking to each other, then it's a similar concept. it synchronizes state across remote clients, basically. So if you've got two models, then you can basically synchronize state across them. And it's built in a peer-to-peer fashion, but you can use it with a centralized server, but the server is just another client. And this is important. The clients don't have to understand Ruby. They don't have to be written in Ruby. They just have to understand JSON. So this is how it works behind the scenes, a simple overview. Let's say a new user was created. Then you had a new scribe is created. And that scribe will reference, it will say this model user was created, and here is attributes. And then that scribe is transmitted, and then the remote clients play that scribe, and then the new user is created on the remote client. And this, all you have to do for this, to use this, is include synchro model in your application, in your model. And but if you're not using active record or supermodel, then you have to include synchro base. And the other thing you have to do is connection management. Synchro doesn't actually do connection management for you. So this is an example of an event machine connection. It's quite a simple API. There's not much that can go wrong here. And here's a little synchro demo of it in action. Usually, these two clients would be on two different desktops. I've included a slight delay between the updating, so you can actually see that it's, it's really happening. If you create a new task, then that's created on the remote client. If you change anything to a task, then that's reflected on the remote clients.
Is that your beta project?
Yeah, that's task force. Task force. Yeah.
How do you deal with the replays and getting the same message twice and whatnot?
The protocol basically is a client will record the ID of the last scribe that it saw from a remote client. And then when it fetches new scribes from that remote client, it will say that was the last ID that I saw. Can I have all the scribes since that? So that'll synchronize the state. And these apps work offline. This file that you've seen that was just dragged on there actually has been now downloaded locally, and then you can access it all offline. So what's next for Synchro? Well, you might have guessed it, but I'm going to be building supporting Synchro to JavaScript. So iPad apps, offline iPad apps, offline iPhone apps, and then it will resynchronize when you go online, and they'll communicate with your desktop apps using the same protocol. So that was 3 bits of my talk, Bowline, CSS3 and HTML5 and Synchro. There's a list of links at the end. Any questions? So the question is, sort of what's the difference between Bowline and Titanium? Or?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, originally, actually, Bowline was built on top of Titanium, but I really wanted a Ruby aspect to Bowline. And Titanium wouldn't provide Ruby 1.9 support. It wouldn't provide thread support, so every time you called out to Ruby, it would block, the UI would block. So I rebuilt my own version, basically, of Titanium in Ruby and WX widgets. And so I guess you could say Titanium is more of a platform and Bowline is more of a framework. You don't have any of that binder stuff in Titanium.
Have you put any thought into WebKit 2, or are you going to use that?
Yeah, the WebKit 2 is going to be amazing because at the moment, every different... oh, sorry, yeah. Have I put any thought into using WebKit 2? At the moment, you have different implementations on Mac, on Windows, and Linux of WebKit, right? So if you want to implement WebKit on all those platforms, then you have a different API. Although the web core is similar, but the actual WebKit API is different. So WebKit 2 is going to standardize the API, and it's going to make that much more easier. Thank you very much.